Good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to go over rethinking school. Now, when I say rethinking school, I'm not necessarily saying like I want to change the entire school system, but I do think that there's an issue with the mental health of students in these schools. So I'm going to go over a lot of that today. But when you think of high school to start, you think of the fun things like football games, prom, graduation, getting into college, and your groups of friends. Obviously, you're making all these great memories, and you're just looking, showing up to class with these smiling faces every single day, right? I mean, who doesn't love school? In college, we go to college to get future jobs. It's a great place to meet your lifelong friends. It's just an amazing opportunity to develop yourself and get yourself going on the right course for the rest of your life. Now, this is kind of a weird question, but can I have four student volunteers? First one that comes up can volunteer. Thank you guys for coming up. Okay, so according to a professor at the University of San Diego, 1 in 5 of us will consider suicide next year. Now, that isn't exactly the greatest statistic you've ever seen. And that's what I'm trying to fix here. There's a big problem in these institutions of student stress overwhelming them and making them want to consider suicide. And a little bonus here, too, high schoolers, 90 or 39% of these high schoolers experience persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. 25% of them experience mental health and depression, and 20% of them seriously considered attempting suicide during their high school career. Thank you guys. Y'all can sit down. Thank you. So, why does this happen? I mean, there's obviously has to be a reason for this. Now, one major thing that takes a toll on students is grades, especially letter grades. Now, this is a good way to like compare students, especially if you're getting into college, but I do not think it's the most effective way to like actively teach a class. So students often cite pressure to get high grades as their leading cause of stress and anxiety. And since this grade, this letter grade, weighs so much on their future, like future job prospects, future scholarships, what college they're going to get into, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And research that's shown towards these grades has shown less motivation for students who get bad grades. And once they get those bad grades, their student teacher relationships get worse, and also their peer to peer relationships get worse due to them comparing themselves to each other. So, what's a good fix for this? Now, pass fail is an option, and I think it's a pretty solid option. So, a study also compared the effectiveness of pass fail versus A to F grades, and it did find that there was a significant increase in the interest of students throughout the course. Um, they found that the A to F grades did not enhance the motivation for learning, but the pass fail did. Now, I don't think that this pass fail system is perfect, and like obviously it can't be used to compare students because if you're going into college, you can't compare 60,000 kids who all pass a certain grade. So I don't think that it's the most effective way, but I do think it's a good way to be on the right track towards something. They also found that gradeless learning did reduce anxiety and depression in students. Now, whether we can incorporate that in certain assignments, we can talk about that later during the questions time. But I do think it's a step in the right direction, especially because I do think that A to F grades can take the focus off the process of learning and can direct that focus towards solely that end product. Now, what I mean by that is that the goal of high school generally is to get this high school diploma. And you can get that in many different ways, whether that's getting good grades or using this little thing we like to call Chat GPT that can help you do all of your assignments for you. Now, whether what way you're going to go about it is your responsibility. But I do think that this is important to know because these students who are using ChatGPT aren't using it because they don't care. They're using it because they do care and they don't believe that they have like the mental like well-being of actually getting those good grades to get into college. And so that can lead to students being unequipped to go into what field that ever they're wanting to go into. So, one of my biggest problems with the school system is homework. And if you've talked to me before, you can probably assume this. So, what are the negative mental health impacts of homework? So, a study found that too much homework can actually diminish the effectiveness of it. Now, this can seem pretty obvious to some people, especially if you are taking classes that do over assign homework. But a lot of students in this study were quoted as calling it pointless or meaningless and mindless. And what's the point of doing homework 4 times a week if you're just doing it mindlessly, especially? If you're not putting any effort into this homework, what is it going to give back to you other than just wasting your time? And American teenagers, there was a study on how much hours they actually spend per week. On average, students spent about 15 plus hours on homework, and 1/3 of the country spends 20 or more hours on a week on homework. And this is more time they spend doing clubs, working, and sports in most cases. And I think that the school to life balance should be better than that, especially with students who are trying to like find their future passion. I believe that homework can get in the way of finding that passion, especially if that student is very like tight on their schedule. They have class, they go home, get ready for work, go to work, come back, do their homework, go to sleep every single day. How are you supposed to find your passion or hobbies or anything? It can just ultimately lead to a massive waste of time, especially leading into the later nights on school. It can really just be useless and be wasting your time for sleep or anything else effective. So I used a personal example of this. This is my first semester pre-calculus course, and as you can see, there's 5 total tests, 12 total quizzes, and 48 total classwork homework grades. It says classwork, but I have checked this. All 48 assignments are indeed homework grades. So this is about 74% of the total coursework you actually take over the semester. And how much it actually affects, each assignment is worth only 0.3% of the total grade. Now, on average, I spend about an hour and a half on every single homework assignment that semester. And each one was only worth 0.3% of my grade. So you be the judge on if that is worth my time and sacrificing the thing I sacrificed to do that homework. Now, that is not saying that I don't believe that homework can be a good way of like practicing a skill, but I think there is a certain extent that you can take where you don't need 48 total homework assignments in a semester. I'll get more on that later. So, what are some ways that we can help students' mental health? Now, a major way to decrease a student's stress in his life is to give him more time. And I know that's just the most shocking thing you've ever heard, but it can help them open up time for jobs, sports, and especially sleep. Sleep is very important. There was a big study done on school age children, so people our age, how much sleep they need, and it's usually around 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And when they were actually like interviewing these students about like how much sleep did they actually get, students were cited having around on an average 6 hours of sleep, and 74% of those students, which was the lowest recorded from the state, were said they did not get enough sleep, and the highest number of students, 84%, said they didn't get enough sleep in Pennsylvania. That is just absurd. That the lowest state in our country percentage of students who get enough sleep is 74%, and that should not be it. And why is this happening? So mostly it's because of homework. They're not able to get the sleep on time. Now, obviously, the homework isn't taking up all of those hours in your night, but it is leaving off that time they can use for free time. And so students often feel like they haven't like lived that day or done anything important. All they've done is school, so they want just time to themselves. And so that can be a common problem for students staying up, especially past hours after midnight. So my main goal here is for schools to focus more on the mental thriving of students instead of the mental destruction on students. Now, obviously, they aren't going for the mental destruction of students, but it can like indirectly happen from like the ways the teachers are assigning them work and stuff like that. So, what does the Bible say? Now, in Genesis 1:26-27, it says, Then God says, Let's make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In his image of God, they created them. Male and female, he created them. So basically, what I'm trying to get from this is that it's very important for parents and teachers, especially teachers, to view their students as images of God. Now, I think that our school does a really good job of this. I constantly praise the teachers here, but especially with students maybe going into a field of teaching, and many of us are going to be future parents one day. So it's very important to learn these stuff and remember how to treat your students. And if you are a teacher and treating a student in God's image, then you might not give them that certain thing. You might give them grace in these certain fields and have a different perspective when going about like classwork. My next one is Galatians 6:9-10. It says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap the harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong in the family of believers." So this is pretty straightforward. It's just saying like do good to other people. And I think that is a big thing for teachers because the majority of the students' lives is spent looking at this teacher for 5 days a week for majority of the year. And so what does that teacher's impact do to a student? They're a significant like not parental figure, but a very strong role model in their lives. So if they see you doing something, they're very likely to pick up that at least perspective of stuff. So when you're a teacher, it's very important to stay like with a good mindset, be very like bright and just showing them kindness, and that usually helps with students' mental health. um, Not only would living these verses as a teacher do good, but also as a parent would do good. I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's your kid, so you're gonna want to be the like most best and supporting person you can possibly be. And so parents can sometimes focus on like the grades of a student and how they're doing. I'm not necessarily saying you did that, but that can happen. That's the main reason students can stress is because of the bars that some parents can set for them. And so just making realistic expectations, making sure they do try in class, but having that perspective that they aren't perfect can actually like decrease that pressure from the students a lot. My last verse is Colossians 3:23-24. It says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward." So this is kind of the same deal. So working in the school environment, especially for teachers, can be pretty difficult sometimes. I know the pay can be off and on, and especially some kids that come through can be pretty difficult. And so it's just keeping that same mindset that whatever you do and whatever you're working on, serve it unto the Lord, and that will kind of like reap the benefits through your work and how you are displaying yourself as like a believer. And schools, especially with the new generation growing up, like this is a great time to touch the lives of students and to get into the lives of students because you are the main focal point to how they're learning a lot of this information. And so it's very important that you're serving unto the Lord and not for some earthly thing like money. So, what is our duty? It's kind of the same things that I just said. It's a recap. So, as a parent or even a student, don't settle. Now, this is definitely a challenge in college and bigger institutions because they aren't usually like tend to change their ways because of a complaint. But especially in the earlier years, in the developing years through like middle school and high school, I think a parent or a teacher, even if a student speaks to a teacher, can effectively like change how something works. And I think it can be really powerful if you communicate with your school and actually telling them what's wrong because a lot of the times they don't even know. Like mental health is a thing that goes very under the radar, and that's why it's such a big problem. And secondly, it's be a strong and encouraging parental figure or educator. So this is like what I was saying in the verses section. You're just wanting to be encouraging to your future student and not and make sure they're not like down about anything or putting too much pressure on themselves. Thirdly, you treat students as in the image of God and don't make their grades the most important thing about them. So this kind of goes back. I know you students know we talked about the whole person thing. So as a perspective from a teacher, if you aren't looking at your students for their grades, but for who they are as a person and who they are as a being and created in the image of God, I think that can really help you have a great mindset of how to actually treat a student like on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Yeah, so I think it all factors into like how you are actually learning. So I think teacher in this room, who I didn't know was going to be here, Miss Mendoza, does actually a really good job at this with a lot of interactive stuff. You do stuff with your classmates, and especially if you get that classmate participation, it does a really good job of like engaging and having like a fun and exciting way to learn things. And especially with pass fail, it can be hard to motivate those students because they aren't motivated for a certain grade. But that just comes down to the student; they have to be responsible for themselves. And yeah, it's just they can't not learn for the sake of learning. I guess they have to learn for the sake of learning, or they're not going to pass. Which it's the same with A to F, but it has a bigger emphasis in pass fail, I guess, because you'll be more tested. Which I don't even think that pass fail is the best way to go about it overall. I just think it can be used, especially for like the classwork homework grades, because for tests, I mean, that's testing your knowledge on something. You still have to have a way to compare different students across the board for college, but definitely when it comes down to those small 0.3% assignments, I don't think there should be such like grade scales on those. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a question. First, let me say I'm totally with you on the homework thing. I'm generally like kind of more of an when it comes to education in many respects, but with the homework thing, yeah, I think it's we're here 7 hours a day.
Yeah.
For a long time with it. I went home and did 3 hours of work every day.
Yeah.
And nobody would call that, I think, a balanced, healthy life. Totally feel that. My question is more about assessments, kind of going on what you're just talking about. You say you're not super. In my understanding, you're not super into the letter scale. There are things that you like about pass fail.
Definitely not gradeless. No.
What do you think is the? Could you elaborate on like what do you think an ideal system?
Yeah.
We want to assess. I mean, we want to, especially if I'm like outside being a teacher, if I'm an employer, like I want to hire the best doctors.
Yeah.
That like right at the top of the medical school. I want to hire the best pilots that were up there.
Yeah.
So
100%.
we want to assess accurately, but
Yeah.
where's the line?
And I think a majority of what I'm saying is related to high school because a lot of my experience obviously has been in high school. I haven't been to college yet, so I can't necessarily speak on like the grading system in college with full knowledge. But I think at least in high school, especially since you aren't designated towards a certain field yet, it those minor assignments don't weigh as much. So I think there's a way you can incorporate a little bit of both, like the A and F and pass fail. Now, how you do that, I'm not sure. I'm willing for a conversation. I just want to bring like light to the fact that a lot of where the students are stressing is those minor grades. And so a way to change it and like have a system, I think honestly it's pretty hard to know because I mean we've been working at it for years. There's been a lot of debates on whether these grades are actually like good or not for students and stuff and whether it's the most effective way. But yeah, definitely when it comes to making distinctions, it's pretty tough to do pass fail. And so if there's like a better way that you can incorporate like maybe the best of both worlds, I'd say that'd be good. Yeah. Yeah. But I think definitely for tests and quizzes it should stay the same just because that's a test of your knowledge. Um, Now, whether that's the most effective way, I'm really not sure. My project is just mainly about bringing light to like why these students are stressed.
Um, Good job.
Thank you.
I'm invested in this subject, so it's really fun to think about. Also kind of frustrating to think about. I want to play math teacher's advocate for a
Mhm.
minute. You, I like that you were trying to get sort of, trying to quantify exactly how much homework, like how much time it is versus how much it weighs against your grade and so on. And maybe it's just my slacker personality, but when I see what was the percentage for an individual homework grade,
0.3%.
so if I'm seeing if this affects my grade 0.3%, I just don't have time that night. Think what I'm thinking?
Yeah, and I think there's a way to combat that. So,
And what I'm saying, so like that's not really my question. Like I'm just
yeah,
what
yeah.
I'm saying.
Go ahead.
Like, so it's like, okay, cool. I'm gonna blow that off when I need to. Now I'm gonna keep a close eye on my grade. I'm not the type A in any shape, personality, GPA or otherwise. So I'll keep a look. I'll keep an eye on my grade, and if it starts to slip, then yeah, I afford to lose those homework grades, as the year goes on. Um, is there anything to say about teachers, students having the attitude or the mentality? Because I've heard, and the reason I'm asking, I've heard teachers with this mentality. I'm going to give you the 48 assignments with the assumption that you might not do them all. I have my thoughts about that. Like in other words, like here's the curriculum, and yes, it does seem overbearing. So if it ever seems overbearing, just don't do it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think there's a way that you can stop that from even happening in the first place. Now, Southside is kind of a weird school with the way we're scheduled. We have 8 classes a day. For seniors, it's 6. And you only have that 45-minute slot to do that schoolwork. And so that's why there's no time to actually do that work before you go home. So I think there's a better way as Southside Christian School that we can go about it, like scheduling wise, kind of something more like a block type of schedule. I know that isn't necessarily the most popular thing ever because you can have like math freshman year, first semester, and then sophomore year, second semester. But stuff like that is kind of rare, and you can work around that with different things, whether that's tutoring or actually like homework. It takes up a lot of time in the afternoon that I could be spending doing other things that I feel like are more useful.
So the bottom line is like school invading the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we're young.
Yeah, and that's what. To Mr. Diaz's point, it's crazy that this is why a lot of us teachers are on board with this, where it's like, imagine, I mean, we got stuff we take home, we got papers to grade and all that stuff. But imagine folks going home with, they're doing their 9 to 5 to begin with, right? And then they go home with an extra 3 hours of work that if they don't do, their boss, gives them a bad grade. In other words, we're trying to prepare you for life in a way that's very unrealistic. It's very not lifelike. And so you got a lot of advocates here for that. I'm gonna quit yapping really quick. Classmates, anybody or other guests, y'all got anything, comments, questions for Will?
So I feel like for me, most of my homework at home is done studying for tests and quizzes. So do you feel like there's any way that, or do you think that's mostly up to the student, or can the teachers do anything about making us feel more prepared so that we don't have to study
Yeah,
that?
I think it's kind of a both thing. So I do believe that studying is something you personally do. You don't have to study, the teacher isn't going to make you study. But I do think that a teacher can more effectively teach you what's going to be on the test and review that during that class period. Because sometimes, you probably know it well, they'll send a study guide and the next day it's nothing like it. So stuff like that I think is totally useless. What's our main goal of teaching this class? Is it to get these certain grades? Oh, these kids are doing way too good in my class, let me give them a hard test and lower that average. No, you're there to learn the coursework, and that's it. I mean, the point of school is to learn, so I don't see a point of tricking your students. So do the review in class and time, and obviously students can do it later, but that's their own decisions.
Anything else?
I'm thinking future college. I mean, that's what you just explained is kind of the epitome of college, at least when I was there. I feel like, do you feel like teachers have to prepare you for college, and you're gonna have to study outside class in college, but you're in class less time. So.
For sure. And college, from what I've seen from other people, you have a lot more time to actually do that work. Some of this stuff happens because of procrastination and bad personal responsibility. So they'll push this stuff off during the day. And it's kind of you can treat it like a 9 to 5 sometimes and get majority of that work done. But college is it's very important, probably more important than high school in some regards. So it makes sense why it's going to be hard. I mean, you're trying to be a professional in that field, but there are ways to balance it better than high school. Because high school, you're stuck in a classroom from 8 to 3, at least here, and then you have the rest of the day that's probably filled with either sports or work, and you have homework to do. It's a lot harder to get work done, especially in classes where teachers will sometimes get mad if you do work homework from other classes in class during their class, which is fair because you're disrespectful to their own lesson. But to the point of these students, they're trying to get this work done because they don't have time to do it later, or they don't want to do it later. They want to actually spend that time relaxing and decompressing from the day. So
To the college experience, of course, it's going to wildly vary depending on the field that you're in. But in my experience, I wasn't in class Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30. I was in the class half that time, even though I was a full-time student. So I had an extra 3 or 4 hours a day that were my work day. As long as I remained disciplined, I didn't feel most of the time overwhelmed with things.
yeah.
So it's a different dynamic completely. I enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah, and you have a 3-hour class in the morning and in the afternoon, and you have time still before it's dark to actually do this work. Most of the time I'm taking this work home, I don't have time until it's 8 or 9 p.m. to actually start it.
Well,
and that's the
especially
problem.
when schools, and where I'm sure you can do this also at this school, is we pile on the homework in 6 classes or whatever, and then we also encourage you to be a band member or an athlete, and as a coach, man, if I had to do 3 hours of schoolwork, you know, like grading papers or whatever, on top of coaching, on top of working, yeah, like my life would fall apart.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I guess like with your presentation, a question I would have is like, would you even recommend like working as a high schooler? Cause like for me, like we get out at 1:05, and I go straight to work at 2, and I'm there till like 8 or 9. I don't really got time like after, or like when I get home, like you said, I'm not even trying to do nothing.
Yeah.
So like, would you even recommend like?
So-
working job?
Personally, unless you're like, if you need like the money, then yes. But if you're like neutral, you just want money so you can buy like video games and clothes, absolutely not. I don't think it's worth it in any way. Especially my personal experience to working, it's severely stressed me out a lot more than I thought it would, and having to balance a lot of these things, like sports is one thing because it's 2 hours. Work, you're there the entire afternoon, and I don't think it's worth it for your mental health at least.
Yeah,
Awesome.
like a lot of this conversation, I think it's a homework issue and it's all about what we're sending home. But just like, not that y'all care, cause you know, pretty much all of y'all are out of here next year. But it's a live conversation at Southside Christian specifically, but also in schools or like, there's a lot of high schools that are moving to they'll call it a college model or a university model, block schedule, what have you. And they're trying to find that sweet spot of, you know, if it's a block schedule, I don't know, like for me, I've heard of block schedules where it's like, it's an hour and a half in a classroom. And that's a lot of time to be in, you know, in one classroom. Like as a teacher, that stresses me out because I don't know what I would do for an hour and a half other than just talk. But like that pendulum swinging back to where it's like, yeah, you're right. Every single person walks away from Southside Christian School, teachers included, and we're just exhausted at the end of the day because 8 classes I'm sorry, this is my boss in here. 8 classes. I happen to know for a fact she would actually agree with this. Like, just so that you know, your principal agrees with what I'm about to say. 8 class periods a day is crazy. 8 meetings, 8 intensive 45-minute sessions of work that I'm expected to get a tremendous amount of work out of my students, knowing that depending on what time of the day it is, you know, first hour, y'all got 7 more of these ahead of you, right? By the time I get to 7th hour, y'all had 6 of these already, you know, and it's just so you know, like, it's a live conversation, like, people are listening, and this is, we're working on it, yeah. Yes, sir.
This has been a great discussion. I want to commend both the students and the faculty, because you look at the success of Southside Christian kids when they graduate, whether it's college or whether it's the workplace, they're all highly successful. So I know there's give and take, and there's a lot of stress, but it's paying off on the outside.
Appreciate that, thanks.
Yeah, so like, I mean, he's right. There's a lot of ways that this can teach you life lessons, like how to work hard, how to manage time. I want schools to be more about, like I said earlier, the mental thriving of students. I mean, this is a place where students are growing up and learning how to live, and that shouldn't be spent stressing about insignificant things.
So let me put my Bible teacher hat on real quick. To that point, our world has a way of pushing on a school like a Christian school. Hey, if you're really gonna compete as a school, your students need to be high achieving students. They need to have high GPAs, they need to be scoring really high on these standard tests. They need to be getting into the best colleges ever. And again, talk about an ongoing conversation at Southside Christian is like, how much of that rat race needs to define us as a Christian school? You know, if we don't have Christian on the sign, yeah, I mean, let's push you to get into whatever you at all costs, right? It's the ChatGPT concept. There are much more efficient ways. If grades are the only thing we're pushing for, there are really efficient ways to get good grades. Now you don't learn anything in the process, but we can get you to a good school like that. But then, you know, what does it profit a student if he gains an Ivy League school and loses his own soul, right?
What's the point? Yeah.
So this is that biblical worldview stuff we're ranting about all the time, and it's like, yeah, just know your school's taking it to heart. Anything else? Last call.
I'm just curious, do you want to be a teacher?
So it's something that I'm considering definitely. I felt called to it a little bit, especially like something like Mr. Diaz does, do a coach on the side and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a field that I'm considering. And if you're wondering like why I actually did this project, it's because of like conversations I've had with like friends and even my personal experiences where I'm really frustrated. Like, why do I have all this in one night? It's just those moments. I was like, might as well do something about this so I can get it out there, especially to teachers and the future parents and future teachers who are you guys.
It's a good gig if you can get it.
I guess, like, I want your opinion on, like, people who know they're not even gonna go to college. Like, how do they even approach something that, like, they don't even really need.
They don't even really care.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like you have to be invested in school if you want to learn. Like, you can't just show up and not care. So if you come to the school with the mentality that you're not going to learn, you're probably not going to learn. And so that's on the persons. And so I don't necessarily know how they would approach it unless they just need to be encouraged to learn that day, I guess, because they don't really need school, like you're right, but it's just personal choice.
Well, and like, Cam, you know I can talk your ear off about this and I won't, like, come see me if you want to, but like, it's one of those things that that's a very specific question that I've thought a lot about. And I wonder if it's not a problem with underlying everything you're talking about here, the bottom falls out and there's another level to this where we are not packaging your education well if the only thing that you all see in a value of school is as a means to an end of something. It's like, why do good at school? So that you go to college. Well, Cam just threw that one at, you're right, man. Like, I'm not going to college. Why am I here? And and most teachers, I'm afraid that most teachers, they just kind of balk at that. But that's why, like, y'all remember conversations in Bible class where I'm trying to get y'all to see, no, like, you grow as a person. If school's done right, and you're saying, like, there's a lot of ways, I'm agreeing with you, there's a lot of ways in which it's not done right? We're contributing to the problem. But when school is done right, you start to recognize learning something is good in and of itself. It makes you a better person. So that even if you don't go to college, whatever job you do pursue right out of high school, ideally what we're doing here makes you a more well-rounded, more capable person doing whatever you're gonna do next year. That's the goal. And so like that, and that's what I'm saying, like, I would love to take the onus and the responsibility as a school and as a teacher to say, hey, if my student blocks that question, well, why do good in your class? So you can go to college. I'm not going to college. If I don't have a good answer for that student, I'm pretty convinced I shouldn't be teaching that subject. But if I can step up and say, how does my subject make you a more complete person? That's education. And for someone that might be considering it, I'm letting you know there's a bunch of us out there that are of the same mind and same heart, and I'm hopeful for it.
Yeah, if I could piggyback off that real quick to your question. I think it's a good question. Yeah, you're right. You like totally threw the whole thing out the window.
Yeah.
Like, hell, I'm not going to college. You definitely like totally intrinsic value in learning in and of itself. But also on a practical side of things, like whenever you're in a job interview, I always tell students to ask, like for a job interview class, I always say, at the end of the day, like, be prepared and all that, but at the end of the day, try and get these 3 things across to your employer, future employer, hopefully. That you're a hard worker, that you're a quick learner, and that you'll do the job with integrity. Like that's, most employers, they hear that, and it's like, they believe that, but in the interview, they're sold. Regardless of your experience. You're a quick learner, you're a hard worker, and you do the job with integrity. This is where you practice that, like, this is what equips you to be able to, like, show your employer that, when you're interviewing for that first job, or your first, 40-hour-a-week job, or whatever. If you don't practice that here, then I don't know if you should feel too confident that they should feel too confident that you're gonna do that with the job. So there is definitely intrinsic value in learning, but there is also a lot of practical,
I think looking at the biblical too, this is where in Christian school, the scriptures you had in Genesis, you're made in the image of God, so if you're made in the image of God, and God created us to work in the garden, right? And even the other scripture about, work is unto the Lord. I mean, so this is part of who you are, your identity is you're gonna do the best you can do, because this is where we're called to be, we're called to shine. And, we don't have all our entire identities in our A+ grades, obviously, I've told you that since you were little. Do the best you can do, work as unto the Lord, and, the rest will take care of itself.
I don't know if y'all remember this far back, but when we talked about work, like Genesis 1, I promise this is the last thing I'll say. Maybe. Genesis 1, like work wasn't a part of the fall, right? Like work is there before sin is, right? So the curse is not work itself, the curse is meaningless work. I think there's something theological to what you're arguing here. The problem is not classwork, schoolwork, homework, that's not the problem. The problem is whether or not it's attached to any kind of meaning or any kind of purpose. And there's something, deeply theological, but also extremely practical about it, where if I'm giving you an assignment and it doesn't have purpose behind it, whose program am I really on, right? Yeah. All right, last call. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So this is kind of more of a question for you and for the other teachers, but like when you went through high school, in the high school system, did you see like that homework was a problem?
I hated high school. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask this question.
Yeah, no, seriously, I hated high school. I felt like it was, every experience is different, of course, and my school was very different from this school, but, mindless work all the time. Mindless worksheets, and like if the teacher was out, the sub would like give us a word search, right? Like it was completely mindless, a lot, not all of it. And that was frustrating, especially, I felt like I often felt like it was waste of time. So,
My high school is very similar to Southside Christian. In fact, like, people I work with know my high school. It's another ACSI school in Florida. Like, it's whatever. Okay, fine, whatever. It's very similar. Please don't let us get out. My senior year, I made a bet with a friend of mine that I would not do any homework my entire senior year. And I won that bet. And my senior year, I graduated with A's and B's. Which goes to show, whatever, apparently I didn't miss anything, right? Like I went through that whole math, now there's more to that story to be told, but yeah, tests, quizzes and stuff, okay, fine. I halfway listen in class, cool, I'm good at taking tests, no problem. So apparently, to your point.
I also, there's a statistic too that like that research study that I showed on the effectiveness of like grading and stuff, homework didn't actually have a direct correlation to bettering the grades of students. Most of the time it had zero effect. Little to no effect on the student, whether they did the homework or not.
Yeah, and one thing that's been going through my mind all the time is I think homework is more necessary in certain subjects.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like in math, it totally is more necessary.
100%.
Like, but in a history world, in a Bible world,
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's necessary to give you an hour of homework. And so perhaps if teachers of the various subject areas kind of were more sensitive to that dynamic, you might still have a lot of math homework, but might back off on the other stuff.
Yeah, and like especially considering math, I know like math, you need a lot of practice in math, obviously, but I don't think that needs to be limited to just homework. Like most of the time, every math course I've taken here, it's a lesson in school and the practice at home. I think there's a way, especially if we increase the class time, that you can do both during class time and limit what you're actually taking home.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because like I feel like personally, I'm not a math guy at all, but I'll sit and watch Miss Wilson or whoever teach and I won't get anything from it. I'll be completely lost. And then I'll do like 30 practice problems and then I'll finally know how to do it. So I feel like I'd be way more beneficial to me if she just like I love the way Miss LaFlamme taught because she would just be like, she'd go through it quick, she'd be like, oh, don't worry about it. And then she'd do 40 practice problems and then I'd get it. Because
in person.
Yeah, because I'd be able to ask her questions, she'd explain it through actually practicing instead of like just throwing you in the deep end to practice all the hard stuff by yourself. So.
All right, cool. Everybody give a round of applause as well.